Welcome to the HSP podcast. I'm Julie Bjelland, and we're recording live in our sensitive empowerment community. And I'd like to welcome everybody that's joining us live. And hello, Willow. Willow McIntosh is here with us today too.
Hi, Julie. Great to be here.
Yes, so good to be here and so fun. We always have a good time talking right before we record. And just enjoy connecting with you guys. So today we're going to be answering questions from you guys that came in. So we thought we'd give you a chance to be able to ask questions, and we'll see if we have any good answers, right, Willow?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we shall see what comes through.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'll see how many we get through. I'm going to start with the ones that came in from the community, and of course, anybody that's live with us has anything, they can also put it into the chat. So let's get started. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Willow, before we got started on questions?
I don't think so. I think, just to keep the questions coming, whether it's here today or, in the community, by answering and reaching out to us via the podcast. It's so important to ask questions. Mentioning it just before, there's no silly question. It's a unique experience being an HSP. So whatever is in your heart, on your mind, let us know.
That's very true and well said. Yes, absolutely. And I know we're all at different parts of our journey of learning about ourselves and this trait. Some people listening are going to have just learned about this and have a lot of questions about the beginning of really about the trait. Then others are asking questions about, how to manage some of the challenges and different things. And I was just saying this before we recorded, I'm open to questions about me and my experience and things like that too. So Rachel asks, how can we stay regulated and balanced while we are feeling deep excitement? And it sounds like she's really talking about in the sense of how can we have a peaceful night's sleep without twisting and turning? That's a good question. It's so true when we're excited. So much is going on for us physiologically. I mean, I've had that experience where I'm laying in bed and like my heart is racing because I'm excited about something and I'm not anywhere near sleep. I do think because we experience the world so magnified, for so many of us experience the world like that we have to allow in some ways some processing of all emotions, even the excited ones. So like having something really exciting happen and then just think we're going to go to sleep right away, that might be challenging. But giving ourselves, I always feel like for me, what I do is I do a kind of a 3-step process. The first step is that I'm really processing what I'm feeling, just taking it all in, letting all the thoughts kind of spin around and get clear about what is it that's going on for me, and just allow time for that. And then that second stage, I go into kind of like, okay, now is the time to write down some of the things that are coming up for me so that I know that maybe those are things I want to look at later, especially if I need to prioritize sleep. Then I want to go into a stage of like rest where I'm trying to meditate, go into a more mindful state, more slowing down. It's almost like I can feel the sense of slowing my nervous system down, really focusing on breaths and my body, giving myself time to just reach that level of stillness and give myself time for that, because I think that that's a big part of it. And another thing I want to say too is if there's a lot of excitement moving through you, or even agitation or anger, anything that's kind of intense for you, sometimes a movement before that is helpful to kind of get it out of your body. Some HSPs talk about they love to dance, or maybe you want to go for a walk or a swim, or do something that's movement to kind of move that energy through you. So those are some of the ways that I do it. What about you, Willow?
Yeah, I love it. You've covered all the key areas that I also use myself. I think I think I know if something exciting is happening. You mentioned it already, Julia. If something exciting is happening, I know that it's likely I'm probably not going to sleep as well as I would normally. So then then I can kind of foresee that. Is there anything that I need to do around?
Excuse me.
One of the things that I found quite useful is when I feel super excited is to writing. I find is really helpful is to write through, just to allow myself to kind of bring pen to paper and allow some of that energy to ground. But one of the key questions that I like to ask myself is, what is it that's most important to me about this? Because often I find myself super excited because there's something underneath all of it that really matters to me. And it's almost as though that part of myself is trying to be heard. So when I ask myself that question when I'm writing, that really helps me to acknowledge the very piece that it almost feels like my soul is shouting at me. And so once I've acknowledged that, then it helps me to settle a bit more into the techniques that, especially the techniques that you've just mentioned there, Julie. And also, walking I find really helps. Even if sometimes it's 2 a.m, if I go and walk up the hill, even if it's for half an hour, I find that really helps me just to process and settle and ground, shift my state, and then welcome sleep.
Yeah, I like that, Willow. I also take a bath, as many of you know, that's a big one.
Yeah.
But I like what you talked about you're really kind of paying attention and you're acknowledging it, because it reminds me of like the child who wants their parents to see something, like, mom, look at this, look at this. It's like, pay attention to that, what that is. And that inner child excitement and acknowledging that, even brings in some of that cognitive into it too, which supports that emotional side. That is very good. So Alicia has a question live. How many alone time hours and downtime hours do you have each week or day on average to be at your thriving state? I know you recommend 2 hours a day, 1 day a week, but what are your personal amounts? That's a great question. This depends on so many different factors for me personally. Like if I've been really busy or I've been talking a lot, for me, like talking, visiting, even if I'm having a great time, those are things that can be quite draining. So it has a lot to do with how much I've taken care of myself before I got drained. Also, like if I've been doing my regular practice and meditating and having downtime, I don't need as much each time. But if I've been over busy and skipping some of that self-care, it's almost like it takes a lot longer for me to catch up to it. So I would say it varies a lot. I don't think too much about the actual amount of time, as I'm very blessed to work from home, for example, and have a flexible schedule in most cases. So I'm able to, listen to my body. And sometimes you just get a day where you're just really tired and you're just like, I just don't have it in me to do stuff today. I need to do more rest. So I might do more quieter activities, little gardening or yoga, or just do some reading or time with my pets or time in nature. And then if I'm really feeling a lot of energy, then I'd be able to do more. So I really listen to my body on a daily basis. At least that's what I do now. I didn't used to do that, but now I've learned that I'm able to do that. What about you, Willow?
Yeah, so I'm very similar. So I'm always checking in with how I'm feeling. Like I can feel when my central nervous system starts to get overextended and I'm pushing myself, and I know that I'm going to pay for that later if I don't take some time to pause and relax and do whatever I need to do. Sometimes that might be like a 10-minute power nap. It might be a walk. It might be just watching something silly on my phone, whatever I need to do just to switch off and allow my system to recuperate. And I can feel when it's doing that. And as I say, I can feel when I'm overdoing it. But I find also one of the things that really comes through for me around downtime is guilt around downtime. When I feel like I'm battling with myself around whether I should be taking downtime or whether I should be pushing and getting things done. And through my experience of that, I've come to realize that that really doesn't serve me when I'm continuing to try to push because I feel like I ought to, rather than actually being in contact with myself and being honest about how I'm really feeling, what I'm trying to achieve, and having that sense of alignment. So it's about feeling deeply into the state of myself, what I know needs to be done, and am I truly honoring my energy and what really needs to be done. So it's a balance really of alignment that I find, and making sure that I'm taking the time when I need it.
Yeah, that's such a good point about the guilt, because especially as HSPs, we like to be productive. It's a part of who we are. We feel like we need to get a lot of stuff done, and we might have like a whole plan for ourselves that we want to accomplish. And it's really common to experience that guilt because society is telling us, go, go, go. And somehow rest is lazy, but that is not the case for HSPs. Rest is not lazy for anybody, but especially for HSPs. We have so much processing that we're doing all the time. And it is something that we need to provide time for. So as I always say, an HSP doing nothing is an HSP doing something.
Very good.
That's a great question, Alicia. And anybody else live, you want to put your questions into the comments. Okay, we'll go with Cecilia and Kristen, and Willow, I'll have you start with this one. Can you speak to how perfectionism keeps us trapped from trying out new things and leading our lives with curiosity?
Great question. Yeah, I really relate to this. I think perfectionism is something that is a double-edged sword. I think it serves us in some ways as HSPs in terms of us because we're conscientious, or because we want to do a good job and we care deeply, and our sort of deeper calling resonates a lot with what we're up to in our lives and in our days. But also, perfectionism can be a way for us to hide, and a way for us to not want the world to know that we are sensitive and that we're experiencing the world in a different way. So I think that it can stop us from trying new things, and it can stop it, as you say, leading our lives with curiosity. And this is a really interesting area, because life is really dictated and governed by creativity and making mistakes. Like, a lot of humanity evolves through discoveries that we make through mistakes. And we don't really know what's going to happen around the corner, and life is one giant leap of faith, really. And so I think when we restrict ourselves through the fear of being seen for who we really are, the consequences of getting something wrong, the fear of failure, the fear of success, all of these things can hide themselves within perfectionism. So I think it's so crucial for us to check in with ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis and ask, what is it that's stopping me from doing this? Why am I feeling this restriction or this contraction within me? And how can I take a little baby step perhaps to challenge that and to do what I really want to do in this moment?
That's so awesome. I like what you said. Life is a giant leap of faith. That is so true. That is so true. For me, it's interesting, my journey about perfectionism. It changed a lot when I learned more about the trait, and I realized that that was a part of our experience. And I also realized for me, it was tied into a lot of my self-worth. Like, I grew up thinking that if I was perfect, I would be liked. And so I just needed to be perfect. And that was an incredibly difficult, lonely, anxious producing state to be in. And it is incredible I also really changed a lot through learning a lot about vulnerability. And I love Brene Brown's work, The Power of Vulnerability. She did a TED Talk that was so good. But the sense of connection, for example, we connect through vulnerability. And the more I was able to practice being vulnerable myself, which is really, to me, almost like the opposite of perfectionism, is being able to be vulnerable and real and authentic, that I started realizing that there were certain people, like Glennon Doyle was another one that came up for me. Like every time I heard her talk or I read her stuff, I was like, man, she is so vulnerable and so open and so revealing. And I felt really connected to that. And I think that helped me open up more and realize that that is how we connect. We connect through our vulnerabilities. We connect through our mistakes and our challenges. And we don't connect with perfectionism. And usually perfectionism is kind of hiding something. It's like the exterior coating, and really being able to take that off and go down into a place that we can just be ourselves in the world with each other. That's how we feel that kind of connection to each other in a much deeper way. So that was a part of my journey.
I love that. I think there's a really, I know we got to move on to the next one. I just want to say there's a really interesting piece, I think, between vulnerability and truth, because Brené Brown talks about how vulnerability is an access to our power, our sense of empowerment. And I think when we're willing to be vulnerable and have that connection, it's when two people really start to connect at a deeper, more meaningful level. And I think perfectionism kind of hides that sense of truth. It tries to keep us protected, but ultimately we pay the price of that.
Yeah, it keeps us disconnected. And I think it's helpful to understand, to really just like look at where it's coming from and what is it trying to, are we putting our worth into it? Are we, able to reveal our true selves? I think so much of my journey has been about how can I really show up as my real authentic self and stop wearing that perfectionist mask. And I'm so much happier when I'm able to do that. And it is definitely a journey. And when I first started it, and I think a lot of people, when they're in the practice of being able to identify perfectionism in themselves, there's a real tightness and constriction in your body when you are in a moment of trying to be perfect. And you'll feel that in your body, versus when you're able to let go of that, there's a softness and there's an opening that happens. And that's another cue. And I found that it isn't something that we kind of accomplish overnight, but being able to identify it and notice it in yourself, because, oh, wow, there I was trying to, I had my perfectionist mask on, and this is how it impacted me. But being able to look at it in a loving, kind of curious way within yourself to kind of explore it a little bit can be a beautiful practice.
Beautiful. Well said.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to another question. Betsy asks, I get severe overwhelm when driving, particularly in busy or unfamiliar areas, like going to the airports. And it looks like her question was really based on, like, now she's saying that she gets rides to the airport, but a lot about even being in the airport itself and the whole experience. We had a post in the community that people wrote in ideas for like for travel that helped them. And I remember a lot of people talked about wearing sunglasses in the airport because of the bright lights, even having a hat on, doing things like either having headphones that have like soft, gentle music. Could be like even meditative music, something that is calming to you, or depending on what kind of music you like too, even if it's just any kind of music you like, can be beneficial for some HSPs. But paying attention to the sensory overload part of that, I think, is also important, and being gentle with yourself. I also struggle with driving in a lot of traffic. It is something that is challenging for me as well. And I found that the 4-2-7 breath technique that we use is also really helpful. So that's, you're breathing in for the count of 4, you're holding it for 2, you're exhaling for 7, and you're doing that about 5 to 7 cycles. And that long, slow exhale is really what's sending a signal to your brain that you are not in danger. So you don't want it to send out all those alarm bells and release all that adrenaline. So that's a great method that works really quickly to lower your heart rate. prepping yourself ahead of time for busy environments that you're going to be in so that you're rested before you begin. Because one of the things that we've noticed with sensitivity, the more depleted and fatigued we are, the more our sensitivity challenges become even more of a problem. But the more we're kind of living in balance and we're prepping ourselves to expel that kind of energy in busy environments, we're able to keep our nervous system a little bit more balanced. What do you think, Willow?
Yeah, absolutely. I really relate to this because I know many of us are high sensation seeking HSPs, and as a result of that, for me, I love to travel. So I love to explore new places, but I have to really plan what I'm doing. Like if I send myself into a new environment, driving to airports, I really relate to this because airports are they're such big places. There's so much going on. There's so much traffic going in and out, and it can get super hectic. And if I don't think about what I'm doing, give myself enough time and really focus, either I can end up super lost, or it can be, really overwhelming in terms of, the lane changes and trying to figure out how to get into the airport and all of these things. So what I've found is if I absolutely make sure I'm giving myself lots of time, so there's no rush. If I'm rushed and I have to take on this kind of sensory onslaught, that makes it 1,000 times worse. So definitely making sure there's enough time. But also I find when I'm driving and I'm visiting these places, for me, I've realized that if I have to visually look at a GPS or a sat nav, that doesn't work for me. I get confused about where I am within the lines on the screen, and that doesn't work for me. But if I'm listening to you have an exit coming up, get in the left lane, that really helps me. And also what I've realized is that I have to make sure that there is no other distractions for me. So I'm not thinking about where I'm going to, have I left the gas on or whatever it is. Like I've attended to everything so I can totally focus on nothing else than getting to that location. And perhaps I Google Earth it so I can see where I need to put my car if I'm going to, short or long-term parking, whatever it is, or am I getting the train or however I'm getting there. So I plan for as much as possible and make sure that I'm solely focused on the task at hand. And then everything else that you've described there, Julia, like headphones in, well music on, sunglasses. Sometimes I found in airports especially, there are the prayer rooms where you can go and if you go into a prayer room, it's totally silent and you can sit there and just be and meditate. So there are places in the airport that help you to get the kind of relief from the sensory overload that you need. But I find time and preparation makes a massive difference.
Yeah, that's a very good example. And yeah, I just dropped somebody off at the airport recently, and I was thinking about just the chaotic energy of everybody around too, that we're absorbing that. We're, especially those of us high up on the scale of sensitivity, we're like sponges. So also doing energy protection work. And we've talked about that in some of these episodes and different articles in the community and stuff too. But the sense of prepping for some people, it's almost like you can imagine you're in a bubble or you have a ray of light around you, that you're meditating before you're walking into that space. But just to also recognize that the people around you are having, really chaotic energy, very stressed out energy. And that is going to be something that's easily absorbed by us. And then we're going to feel it ourselves. So being aware of all of that ahead of time. And I like how you said, Willow, that you're prepping. These are ways that we can really support ourselves. And I always say, create these, these templates for yourself that you learn from each experience. Like maybe you something went wrong, learn from it. Like, okay, I got really anxious in this particular situation. How can I do it differently next time? So that what would I need to do to support myself next time? Like, don't be hard on yourself about it, because that doesn't get us anywhere. It just makes it worse. But instead, really just learning what supports you personally on that day is something that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Betsy, I noticed where you say that afterwards you feel exhausted. Me too. No matter how much I prepare, I'm always going to feel exhausted the next day. So I take that day off, or I make sure that I'm adding another day onto my itinerary to allow me to settle, get to know where I am, have a whole day to myself so I can relax, recuperate, and then I can go into whatever I'm doing on that journey. So it's creating that space to recuperate.
Yes, I like that because you're planning for it and you are taking care of yourself before, during, and after. And these are ways that really support us. And be kind and gentle with yourself. So we have some questions coming into the chat. Linda's asking, I'm thinking about writing a book. I know Julie is working on a book. I have so far only written blog posts. Do you have any advice about getting started? Yeah, there's different ways to do books. I've done books where you're published with a publisher, and I've also done self-publishing. I've done both. If you're interested in getting in with a publisher, in most situations, you have to go through a literary agent first, if it's a big publisher. This is my experience. Things may be different in different parts of the world, but for the book that I'm doing, I was lucky enough to have the publisher approach me because they found my work online. So that's great that you are writing blog posts and you're getting yourself out there. Because also publishers want you to have a platform too, to be able to market the book. So they if you've already worked on, you're getting your website out there, you've got your blog going, you're connecting, you're growing your audience. These are all things that the publisher is also going to be looking at. So usually you have to do like a query letter and to like a literary agent, and then eventually you have to do what is called a book proposal. And that usually includes things like the table of contents and 2 sample chapters and a lot of marketing information, like who's your audience and what are other types of books that are out there that are similar. Well, how's your book going to be different? So anything that you can do to really build that audience, it's going to be something supportive that from the publisher is going to like that. If you're looking at self-publishing, for example, Amazon has self-publishing there's a lot of different self-publishing possibilities also, where it's like print on demand books or ebooks or both. So that's kind of a quick summary. I know there's a ton more to say about that, but that's a quick summary. Anything you wanted to say about that, Willow, before we moved on?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it all. I have some experience. I have one book that I've self-published, and then a chapter that I contributed to a book that was published through a publisher. But one thing I will say that I think really helps is if you're trying to figure out what the content of the book is going to be, if you were to write what are the top 10 points that you really want to share, what are the pieces that you really want to get through, those can then become the headings of the chapters. So you can allow yourself just to get the content to come through you by figuring out what those headings are and then fill it in from there. So if it feels a bit overwhelming about what you're writing, you can manage it in that way. But I definitely recommend getting support around it. Make sure you got someone that's going to edit it for you, someone that has experience of doing it before. And as Julie says, figure out what route you want to take. It can be a very lonely process if you're doing it by yourself, and there's so much support out there that can help you to get it right.
Yeah, and it's great to work with a publisher too, because they come with, like my publisher will have somebody that's doing copy editing, and the sales and marketing department has suggestions for a lot of things. So it is helpful to have that kind of support and to get to know your audience. What are they challenged by? What words are they using? These are things that are really helpful. Okay, so another question Cecilia's asking is, when things get really busy for me, I can become very drained and tired. My body can become achy and fatigued, and also have brain fog, can't process quickly or focus, leading to making mistakes. I know it's because we're sensing and taking in so much that we need to rest and practice self-care at times, but I'm wondering if you have any tips in terms of energy when going through busy times when you can't always practice those self-care tips that help preserve energy. So this is such a great question. Sometimes we're in work environments or something where you're sort of expected to perform, but at the same time, you're in a very drained place. or you're or even if you're at home and you've got tons of stuff going on and you're just completely drained and there's so much ahead of you that you have to do. Some of the things that have personally worked for me are practicing mindfulness and slowing my movements down. So even if I'm just walking to the bathroom, instead of being in a race and up in my head, I slow down and I try to come into my body and I just kind of check in with myself and observe what I'm experiencing and practice some loving kindness towards myself in that moment, because I think you even said you can feel like a sense of panic when there's so much to do and you might not even feel like you have enough energy to get it done. And I think HSPs are in a lot of situations at work and in home life where we are getting burnt out and there's just so much to do. It's a never-ending list, and it's very common that HSPs are sort of taking care of everybody else too, whether it's at work or at home. And there's a whole other conversation about that, about working on setting boundaries and things like that, about not taking on too much. But we also have to look at it sometimes like a car. Like if you're driving a car and your car runs out of gas, it's just not going to go, and we don't expect it to go without gas. So even in a bigger societal picture, we have to be able to give ourselves that rest when we need it, whether that's taking a day off from work, whether that's taking a longer lunch hour and getting out into nature by yourself. And nature to me and to many HSPs is often the fastest restorative method. Just having quiet silence, even doing things like putting an eye mask on for like 20 minutes and earplugs and just silencing the senses. These are things that can really help us in lots of different ways. So there's so many little things to pick apart with this, because there's the methods you might use in the moment, and then there's the broader sense of changing what's expected of us and being able to take the breaks that we need so that we aren't reaching those places of total fatigue. I don't know, there's so much to say on this. What do you think, Willow?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you've covered some really excellent areas there. I think when it reaches that level, as you describe it there, Cecilia, and I really understand what you're referring to here, aching, fatigued, mentally, it's the brain fog, can't process quickly or focus, leads to mistakes. For me, from my experience, that is when I'm definitely taking on too much. And I'm also at a point where I'm overtired. But one of the key areas that I think Julie's just covered there is I have to ask myself, what I've learned to ask myself sometimes is, what am I taking on that's not mine? Because we have the capacity to process what's happening for us in our day-to-day life, in our job, in our work, whatever it may be. But also sometimes at a psychic level, if we're thinking about the needs of others, or we're tuning into others from a distance, and that kind of request that people have on us, boundaries are so important. It's checking in with yourself and asking yourself the question, what is mine right now? And what is not mine right now? Because not only are we processing the demands on our time and our energy that are ours, but we're also processing the demands of others. And that can be incredibly draining. So it's a time, it's an invitation really to check in and stop and rest and use the techniques that Julie's just described there, but also very much to tune in terms of boundaries and asking that question, is this mine?
Yeah, that's good. And we have some really good conversations about boundaries in some other episodes too that we recommend everybody check out. You can go to hsppodcast.com to check out some of those episodes about boundaries as well, where we go into it a little deeper. Let's get into let's see, we got another question from Nicola. How do you establish your boundary around when you share publicly about your childhood when it comes to emotional neglect, childhood trauma, and parents? Ooh, that's a great question, right, Willow?
That's a great question. Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
do you want to start, or you want me to start?
Yeah, sure. Yes. It's a very good question, actually, because I was some years ago, I was working with a branding and speaking trainer who was training me in doing public presentations. And one of the most powerful parts of my story for me personally was my experience with my family and my growing up and my experience during my childhood. And I experimented with lots of different ways of how I shared that in order to help others to benefit and to maintain my own sense of grounding, empowerment, and boundaries as I shared that. And what I came to realize for myself personally is that actually I didn't need to go into great detail really about my experience or the sort of the nitty gritty of it. I found personally that actually I was able to get across what I needed to share in order to help people, for me to be able to express myself fully. There was a balance there. So I think there's an opportunity to tune into what the intention is underneath it all, and actually what the benefit can be from others hearing that story. And I think there's a balance. That's my experience.
Yeah, and for me, I think of it as if I'm sharing something about how it impacts me, I'm talking about it by sharing my story rather than I'm not in a place that, like, if I'm in the beginning stages of trying to understand something and I'm still in the midst of the pain, like the wounding of it, and I haven't done any personal work about it, that can be a more challenging time because the focus can be more on what did they do wrong, meaning that it's like about them and you're sharing their story. But really, if we do our own personal work about some of this childhood stuff, we're able to talk about it from a place of understanding our own experience in it. So being able to say specifically how we have experienced it in our own story, that I own that story because it's mine, and I'm speaking of it from my experience. And to me, that shifts the focus, and it can turn more into what have I learned and gained, and how can this help others by sharing this story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really key point, because all of our experience, no matter what we've been through, it is only going to ultimately strengthen us and help to evolve us into the truth of who we are. So there's always the opportunity to look at whatever we've been through from a victimhood viewpoint, or from a learning viewpoint. There's always a way to reframe what happened to us in a way that helps us to really understand how we can grow from it, how we can serve from that place, and really what we've learned. And so I think if we kind of dive into it and think, well, this happened to me, and am I ever going to recover from it? And, this now dictates my happiness. I don't think that's the case for any of us. I think there is always the opportunity to grow and learn and evolve from what happened. And in that sense, there is a wonderful opportunity for empowerment.
Yeah, I love it. So we have a question about that came in from an anonymous poll too, about that somebody's looking for an HSP psychotherapist. Can you help me? Just wanted to let everybody know we do have an HSP practitioners directory on my website. And that is a public directory where you can find HSP practitioners, therapists, healers, coaches. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And another question about fight flight, like about deactivating the fight flight response when it kicks in. They're using an example of after a meeting, they felt like they were going to burst into tears after being spoken to harshly by somebody that was in authority. One of the things I wanted to mention too about that is that once we've already activated the fight flight, and for those of you that have done my brain training course, you're a little bit more familiar with what I'm talking about too, in terms of the limbic system activation. But once you've already activated that part of the brain and it's releasing that adrenaline and all those stress hormones and chemicals, it takes about 30 minutes for it to, and this is after we've already started to calm ourselves down, like through some of our breath techniques and the different tools that we talk about using. So to know, like, it's not going to be instant that we can it takes time for the adrenaline to get reabsorbed and to stop being released. So plan on, and that's not always possible. I realize, like when we're in the middle of a meeting, I can remember one time being in I was in grad school and we were in some kind, I don't even know what happened, but somebody said something that just, it hurt me. And I just started crying and I had to leave the room, and it was this big thing. And I just couldn't stop it. It hit me at the time and it was uncomfortable and it felt embarrassing at the time. But at the same time, when I look back on it, I mean, we're all humans, we all have real emotions, and that is a real experience for who we are. And I think we have to stop shaming ourselves about it, first of all, and to understand some of the physiology of it too, that it will take a little time. So to have the expectation that it's instantly going to stop once it's started. That's why we talk a lot about brain training in the community and stuff too, about prepping ourselves ahead of time so that we can prevent the release. And then learn from it. Like if it already happened, we have to learn about what's going to be soothing to us, you know, whether it's going into the bathroom and splashing cold water on our face. That is something that can reset the system quite quickly. Doing something like that. And taking a little walk, you know, around outside the building if you can get outdoors, just taking that little break, going in your car, going in a bathroom stall, having time to yourself, whatever it is possible. If you could sit by a tree, that would be great. If you could walk around, if you could put your feet in the grass, little things like that, like grounding techniques can help to soothe you and calm you. And then of course that cold water on you also can stop the response quickly too. So these are just kind of some quick tips that can be helpful. Anything to add to that, Willow?
I think you've covered some great pieces there. Yeah, I think you know, I can think of examples where this has happened for me. I think knowing that it's going to take us longer to get back to our balance because of all of the, as you say, all the physiological pieces that happen there. We're going to feel all of that much more deeply. I mean, I can think of examples, you know, in my younger years of like incidences when driving with my daughter in the car when she was little, and someone driving really badly, and just feeling absolutely furious, and then afterwards processing it for ages, thinking, oh God, you know, I should have shouted out the window, or I should have reported it, or, you know, the thing is, it's going to take time for us to process it, and to for our system, our physiological system to settle, and for all of the, you know, the chemicals that get released when the adrenaline and the fear and the anger and all this that happens, it's going to take time. I think when there's something that's happened and we've been spoken to badly, or, you know, there's something that needs processing, then it helps very much to write down what's happened, write down what you know, what's coming through for you. And also to ultimately remember that I think when we react very strongly, it's typically because we care about something very deeply. And that's actually a very wonderful thing. So again, it's an invitation to look in and ask ourselves, what is it that I care about this the most? You know, for instance, like in the example you've given there, if you've been shouted at or someone's, you know, responded to you badly in a working environment, what is it about that matters most to you? And is there any action that you can take around that? And how can you honor yourself for responding in that way? And I think just giving ourselves a bit of space to process that can help, whilst we're allowing the physiological response to settle, because it's just going to take time.
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about the writing part. That's really important. That also helps to turn on that cognitive brain that supports the emotional brain. And in the process of trying to understand ourselves in that reaction, we're really reacting to the perception of the experience. And that's something to look at too. It's like, what was that? What is it about whatever happened that caused that feeling within you, and to understand it? And, you know, in most cases, HSPs are so just well liked and appreciated in their companies and at their work, because they do such a good job. And I think that we also need to, and then that can be hard if we feel like somebody is being critical of what we're doing, because we're coming from a place of trying so hard to get it right and get it done right the first time. And I think that that's important to look at too. And also to really, I really think that we need a paradigm shift. And I've talked about this a lot But this paradigm shift of accepting the fact that we are humans and that we are sensitive humans and that emotions are real and okay. And to move away from this place that we somehow have gotten into from society teaching us that we are supposed to cover up so many of our emotions and we're supposed to hide them. But I don't think that that is what we should be doing. I mean, emotions are real for humans, and it is okay to have them. And I think we need to change how we're viewing emotions in the first place. That's something that I feel pretty strongly about.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to
Absolutely.
be allowed to be human.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay to have big reactions to things. You know, it's okay to feel to the extent that we do. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's very important to, you know, if we're feeling differently to other people about something, well, that's okay. That's why we're here. We're designed to feel and think differently. So it's honoring that, I think. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and having supportive people around you. It's why I love our community so much, that understand what it's like to be sensitive in the world. Having people that support you and love you for who you are in the world, that's really important. And to do a lot of personal work around that is really important too. So we have one last question, probably have, then we have to say goodbye. How do you face it when someone talks to you sternly in the moment, when it's someone you personally know? I mean, that is something that can definitely cause a reaction in so many of us when somebody's talking sternly. I think it's helpful to, like, if you've been working on your own personal development work where you're getting to know your triggers and your understanding of your reactions. If somebody's talking sternly to me and I feel a reaction in my body, I've gotten to know, what is that reaction? Where's it coming from? What's it about? I get to know it because I've worked on it so much, because I used to be a really reactionary person. And oftentimes we tend to be more reactionary in our personal relationships because that's where we can, are sort of show up as ourselves. So these are things that are helpful in understanding, like why we're reacting, where it's coming from, and to taking time to process, like we've been talking about, being able
Yes.
to process and accept our experience and understand it is huge.
Yes, absolutely. One trick I've learned over the years, when someone is speaking to me sternly, or someone is angry in the way that they're speaking, or they're upset, the question I ask myself is, what is underneath what they're saying?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what is actually happening for them that's making them speak in this way? Because underneath that, there's going to be a need of some kind. So sometimes when people come to us and they appear to be upset with us, it's because there's something that they're struggling with. So by going to that question, what's underneath what they're saying, that will help to reveal the intention or the cause of the reason that they're speaking in that way. And that then gives you the opportunity to help them to get to that, if it's appropriate to do that, to keep the conversation going and facilitate the conversation a little bit and find out what the need is that they have. And that then helps you to discern what's yours and what's theirs. Because if someone comes to us and they're just angry for no reason, we don't know why, then immediately we might think, well, that's my fault, I'm doing something wrong. And then we're taking on everything that may not be ours. So by asking that question, discerning, facilitating the conversation the right way, finding out what's really going on, once we've got that clarity, we can then decide what's ours and what's not.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I want to also mention, that they are reacting. If they're talking really stern to us, they are actually reacting. And so once somebody's in reactionary mode, it's not a good time to be having a conversation. That we need to cool off and calm down, because the cognitive brain kind of goes to sleep when the emotional brain is in a reactionary state. And we can't take in new information. We lose access to memory. That's why a lot of times if you're in an argument, you might notice that you're just spinning in circles and might have even forgotten about why you're arguing in the first place. You just can't take in anything new. So having a conversation when somebody is in a reactionary state is just not the right time to do it. They need to cool off and calm down. So we might simply say, let's have a little bit of a break. and come back to this after we feel a little bit calmer and a little bit more balanced before we continue this conversation. And then both of you have an opportunity to kind of calm that reactionary state.
Excellent advice. I couldn't agree more. I think that makes a massive difference. If we can have a bit of time out, go and settle and cool down and then come back. Really, really
Yes.
good advice. Definitely.
I love this. In our community, I've done a video about communication that I learned from the Gottman method, which is incredible. And it's so, so helpful for those of you that are in the community or that you're coming to join the community. It's titled Effective Communications. So for HSPs, and it's a video where I actually explain some of the 5-step techniques of being able to communicate so that there's not a reaction. And they've done this based on decades of research. And it's an incredibly successful, and I mean, it's amazing. When I was actually seeing couples as a psychotherapist, I'd have couples that told me that they've been arguing over the same thing for, 27 years. And by using this particular method, they were finally able to talk about it. So definitely look that up. And I'd like to invite anybody listening to the HSP podcast to come join our amazing sensitive empowerment community. There's just so many things that we're doing right now. We've got all these different groups. It's really exciting. We've got Gracie King is running our Spiral Up group, which is for overcoming depression. So if you're either in depression or it's something that cycled through your life, that's a great supportive, sacred space. We've got Kristen Cole is running our Design Your Life group. That is a really beautiful space of being really conscious about how we live life differently as HSPs and how to design our life in a way that works for us. And it's a very creative, beautiful space that she runs with her wife, Daniela. And they actually are also doing a little podcast in that group too. That is really beautiful to listen to them talk. And then Andrea Weber is running our HSPs in Business group, which is to help healers and coaches and any HSPs in business. That it's a really supportive space, and you can get listed on our directories too to get referrals, because there's a lot of HSPs that need you. And we've got a group for our courses, and we do weekly live events in the community, all kinds of things. And plus, just I really post daily, and we talk a lot about tools and support in the community. And it's just a really special, sacred space. We focus a lot on having it be very positive and empowering. And I just love it. I love our community. I love you guys for being with us live during these events. And it's really lovely to spend time with you all. So if you want to check out the podcast, check out the community, you can go to sensitiveconnection.com to sign up for all of those things. And I just want to thank everybody for being with us live today. And Willow, thank you it's always so lovely to talk with you and share in this connection that we have.
Yes, it's always so wonderful to be here, and the community is such a wonderful space. And thank you everyone for tuning in and supporting the work that we're doing. And it's all about recognizing the importance of the trait, what we're here to do in the world, how we can truly own our place here and the work that we're really here to do. And yes, and if anyone is interested in learning how to become a coach as an HSP, this is the area that I specialize in. We all have a natural ability to facilitate, coach, and heal, and we all have our own area of expertise, and the coaching industry is booming at the moment. So if that is resonating for you, there's all sorts of support that you can get at highsensoryintelligence.com around that. And most of all, look after yourselves, take care, and looking forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, next time we're talking about making decisions, right, Willow?
Yes, the curse and the gift of making decisions as HSPs and how we get into a pickle about that, and actually the tools and techniques that there are that we can utilize to make this much easier for us.
Yes, that's going to be great. And I'd love to have you guys join us live. We'll be posting that where you can RSVP in the community. We do our live recordings of the podcast in the community as well. So we'd love to have you join us live. And thank you, everybody, for being here with us. I really enjoyed connecting with you all again today and look forward to seeing more of you in the community. Take care, everybody. And I'm sending out lots of love and hugs to everyone listening. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.